happy. I'm happy. Yeah, we are recording. You all heard it. And we are happy to have this distinguished audience and also the keynote speakers with us to share with us their experience and their views on what is needed for an effective and efficient carbon farming. So I will start with a very short introduction. I think you can have all now my screen on your screen. So this very first session is an introduction and welcoming, which I'm on it right now. And this first session is on public and private carbon farming offsets, definitions, goals, and opportunities for conservation agriculture. And I'm very glad to have with us Ms. Valeria Forlin, which we met actually last week in Brussels. But before introducing her and passing the word to her, I would like to go very, very briefly to set the ground for this workshop. Well, does it work? Okay, here we are. You see, today the policy context in Europe is actually based on efficient climate action. Already in 2018, climate neutrality was proposed to be achieved by 2050, and the European Green Deal was defined in 2019. You see here a few of the objectives that should be met in the next years or decades, and starting from nutrient losses to be reduced by at least 50%, and the mineral fertilizers by at least 20% by 2030. The adaptation to climate change should propose nature-based solutions for carbon removals. We will have not only a soil health law, but also a European climate law, which actually enshrines the climate neutrality by 2050, and an emission with regard to 1990 by at least 55% to be reached in 2030. And what we are talking a lot today will be on the certification of carbon removals. You see here, it was supposed to have already EU regulatory framework by the end of 22, but well, I think we are a bit delayed, but I'm sure that Ms. Valeria Forlin will talk more about that. Well, regarding carbon farming, what is actually carbon farming? Are we all aware what carbon farming is? Well, first of all, it's the capture and storage of atmospheric carbon dioxide in plant material and soil organic matter, which is called also removal. Next to it, we have the reduction of the emissions of greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide, of course, but also methane and nitrous oxide, compared to a baseline level. And finally, it's avoiding greenhouse gas emissions. I'm sure that Ms. Pauline will get further into details of these three processes and mechanisms with regard to carbon farming. You see here, we do have these three mechanisms: removal, reduction, and avoidance. And to the right, the graph shows you that this can be considered in different ways, always in relation to a baseline scenario, the business as usual scenario. And then we have actually to propose action, which is the project, in order to mitigate, to remove, and to avoid. And you can get this action through different mechanisms, but I don't want to go now into detail within this slide. I'm sure Ms. Pauline will explain this much better. When it comes to the practice, what is actually what are farming practices that are capable to do carbon farming. You see here, you have here different categories, from cropping systems, grassland management, tillage systems, and so on. And I just highlighted here a few issues where we can say that conservation agriculture is an important player to achieve these reductions, avoidance, and storage or removal. So you see here, these are all the yellow highlighted things are all with respect to conservation agriculture. When it comes to soil amendments, you see, I also have two in red underlined issues, which are organic amendments and the incorporation of straw, which we must consider from the conservation agriculture point of view, which is not actually a reduction or an emission or a removal. Organic amendments, okay, you just take organic matter from some place to another. Does it really add something? The same when it comes to incorporation of straw, which is mentioned here. It says it's both removal and avoided emissions. But if you incorporate straw through tillage into the soil, I think we all know that we must doubt severely about this benefit. And finally, to close this introduction, I will just mention a few projects in which ECAF was and is collaborating, and all of them have to do with climate action and carbon farming. So we are really busy and active when it comes to carbon farming. In this sense, I will finish this short presentation, stop my screen, and also pass then the word to Ms. Valerie Forlin. She is a policy officer for land use change and forestry. She is economist by training, and previously she worked at the University of Louvain, where she was teaching assistant in microeconomics, industrial organization, public economics, and where she also did the PhD in environmental economics. Now she is working on EU climate policies at the European Commission, with focus on the role of the land sector in the fight against climate change, starting from decreasing agricultural emissions to increasing carbon sinks in soils and forests, and to provide sustainable food and materials for everyday life. Ms. Forlin, please, I pass the word over to you and to talk about your topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gottlieb. Thank you. It seems you found a very accurate description of my...
Yeah, I found it. Much better than yours.
Yeah, I just sent you 2 lines.
Okay. I was pleased with this one.
Oh yeah, maybe it's my LinkedIn one. Okay. Should I share my screen?
Yeah.
Right? Yes.
I guess you have a presentation. So
yes, it's open. Just let me entire screen. Okay. Okay. So I hope you can see it. No. Sorry, that's not the right button. Okay, I hope you can see it. So good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. Indeed, like Gottlieb said, we met last week, not for the first time, but just for an update to each other. And I was really pleased to learn more about conservation agriculture, very interesting outcomes and results that you're getting from the many projects you're carrying out. So I'm happy to be here today with you to present the recent proposal by the European Commission on a framework to certify carbon removals. So the first question we need to ask ourselves is why? Why would the Commission or anyone talk about carbon removals? This is actually a topic that is really debated right now. It's coming more and more to the front of the climate debate, because we have always focused on the need to decrease emissions, and this is still our first most important, most urgent need. We need to drastically reduce our emissions because we cannot continue with this pace of global warming. But that, unfortunately, will not be enough. First, there are some emissions that are very difficult to completely eliminate. And then there is so much CO2 already concentrated in the atmosphere that we should one day even become a negative emission economy. So one day we should start to clean up all the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. And to do this, we need also to remove carbon from the atmosphere. So to get to climate neutrality in 2050, which is our goal, and to become a net negative, to provide net negative emissions afterwards, which is also an objective, we need carbon removals, and we need more than what we have today. If you see the graph on the slide now in green, below the zero, this is these are negative emissions, so carbon removals. They should roughly double from what the level they are today. We already see that our sink in the land sector has been decreasing dramatically. It already decreased by almost 2/3 from what it was only 10 years ago. And we have an objective to increase it very ambitiously by 2030 with our regulation on LULUCF. I'll talk about it later. And then also we can, so this will also be a big challenge for the land sector because we are on the completely opposite direction. The sink is decreasing, we have to increase it substantially. And then we have to also integrate solutions from technologies that directly capture CO2 from the air. These are now very expensive and at the very early stage, but this should become more and more, this should become cheaper and more widespread in the future. So a big challenge ahead, and so let's see what the land sector can do in this context. So as I was saying, we have an objective of climate neutrality by 2050. By 2030, we have an objective of decreasing emissions by 55% compared to 1990. And to achieve this target, we have a set of legislation, of regulations and directives. One of these is the regulation on land use change and forestry, LULUCF, the acronym. In this regulation, we set now a very ambitious target, as I was saying, that by 2030, the land sector in the EU should remove 310 million tons from the atmosphere. And as I said, we are not at all on the right track. But these are targets that address member states, governments. So these are national targets. We don't have a comprehensive policy to give incentives to the individual land manager. So to go a bit more into that direction, we published a year ago a communication, so a policy roadmap on sustainable carbon cycles. So how to enable carbon removals, both from carbon farming and from the industrial sector. And in this communication, we announced that the Commission would propose a framework to certify carbon removals. So this is what we worked on for the past year. And 2 months ago, we, sorry, I should say that. And 2 months ago, we made this proposal for a regulation to certify carbon removals. So what does this proposal include? The proposal covers different types of carbon removal activities. We made a classification between 3 types. So we call permanent storage all the technologies, as I said, that remove carbon from the atmosphere and then capture it and store it in a permanent way. So either as a gas in underground reservoirs, so empty gas fields, or as a rock, the carbon is bound to rocks and put under the earth or under the oceans, but this carbon will never be released again in the form of CO2. Then we have another type of, say, technological carbon removal, but not permanent, is when you store carbon in products. So this can be simply wood that has captured, the carbon was captured when the tree grew, or also using CCU, so carbon capture and utilization, so a more industrial way of capturing carbon and putting it into products. But this product has to be long lasting, so at least some decades. So this can happen when you use these products in the construction sector, for instance. And then what is the natural, well-known way of removing CO2 from the atmosphere is by enhancing nature-based solutions and the sequestration of carbon from land, from the soil, and from the trees, from biomass. So this is what we call carbon farming. In the scope of carbon farming, we include all land use management practices that improve carbon sequestration in soil and biomass. This can mean both active sequestering carbon from the atmosphere and reducing the release of carbon from soil and biomass to the atmosphere. So under carbon farming, we are not so strict. It's not only carbon removal, it's also reducing emissions of CO2. But it's always CO2 we are talking about. It's always carbon. We are not talking about activities to decrease emissions from livestock management systems or activities that are primarily aimed at decreasing fertilizer use. These are very important mitigation actions, but they're not carbon removers, and therefore they're not. They can be certified by with other tools, but not with this tool. So what were the objectives of our proposal? The first objective was we need more carbon removals. We need more carbon removals in the EU because we have a domestic objective to achieve. And we need these carbon removals to be of high quality. So the idea was that let's set out some criteria to ensure that carbon removals are of high quality. I will explain later what this means. Then we also recognized that there are many different types of carbon removers. I showed the 3 types, but actually within carbon farming, you have several ways of doing carbon farming. And each of these has specific strengths and weaknesses. And each of these would need different criteria. So we need, one other objective is that the quality criteria should be somehow tailored, should be translated into certification methodologies that are tailored to each carbon removal activity. Another objective is to build trust in carbon removals to fight greenwashing. So there is a problem of trust because now many people immediately think, when we talk about carbon removals, they immediately think of carbon credits or offsets. So recently, many companies, but also private individuals, they want to compensate they want to compensate for their emissions, their impact on climate change. And so they are willing to buy credits to say, okay, I emitted this much, but I also paid for the removal of that much. So this system can work, but only if it's very well governed. And in many instances, there have been cases where the actual environmental climate value of these carbon credits was questionable. And this has eroded a bit the trust of stakeholders in these kind of systems. But we need money to be channeled to these activities. Farmers need money, foresters need the money to do these extra efforts. So we need to find a way that is reliable to bring the willingness to pay of some people and companies to activities that are really good for the climate. And then the last objective was to harmonize market conditions. So here we were just observing that there are many certification schemes out there, many different approaches, also many different uses of carbon credits or carbon certificates. And this can be confusing for the operator, say the farmer who wants to sell, to be paid somehow for these carbon removals. So we wanted to harmonize a bit the certification process so that the operator can be sure, okay, whatever certification scheme I use, they all have the same rules and the same approach and the same procedure. Okay, so this translates into the different sections of the legal proposal. We have 4 quality criteria. It's a short proposal, only 18 articles. We have 4 articles with 4 quality criteria, which I will explain. Then an article saying that in the next years, and the Commission, together with an expert group, will develop specific certification methodologies that translate these 4 criteria into rules that are tailored to each specific type of carbon removals. And then to build trust and harmonize market conditions, we have a series of articles about the certification process, the requirements for the certification scheme, how they should handle the registries of the certificates, and so on. So that we make sure that the certification process is reliable and harmonized. So now I will speak a bit more in detail about these 4 quality criteria. So they are we found this acronym quality, which stands for quantification, additionality, long-term storage, and sustainability. So quantification means that when you look at the actual impact of the activity, the carbon removal activity, there may be also some emissions related to it. So for instance, direct air capture with carbon capture and storage, the technology I was talking about, requires a huge amount of energy. And if this energy is from fossil fuels, then maybe overall the actual benefit of this practice is not so great. So we need to look both at the removals, but also at the emissions. And then we only need to look at, and ensure that the net carbon removal benefit is positive. And we also need to, when we quantify the amount of carbon removals, we should also compare the activity to a good baseline. The concept of baseline is really, really important, and we spent a lot of time thinking about it. In the end, we think that the best way to go about it is to look at a baseline which is the standard practice in similar circumstances. So the idea will be that a farmer will not be compared to what he is doing at the beginning of the project, because this leads to a lot of administrative burden and is also quite subjective and not easy to verify. Instead, a farmer would be compared to what other farmers in similar circumstances do. And similar circumstances, I mean the type of soil, the type of climate, weather conditions, altitude, latitude, these kind of parameters that are outside of the control of the farmer. So that if he does better than what other farmers do in the same conditions, then this is considered a carbon removal that can be certified. This can also be considered carbon removal that is additional. So the concept of baseline and additionality are very much overlapping. So an activity must be additional in the sense that it goes beyond these market practices, because we can assume that if you do differently than what most farmers do, you're likely to doing something that is not required by the law, because otherwise everybody else will be doing it. And you're likely doing something that requires some additional financial incentives, because if it didn't, then other farmers will do it. So maybe this is not so easy to explain, but our concept of additionality is if you go beyond what is a standard practice in similar circumstances, we consider that your activity is additional. Then on long-term storage, here the problem we had is that we have some permanent storage, as I said, with some technologies, and then we have carbon farming, which is temporary, cannot ensure permanence, but is also still very important because carbon farming approaches can improve the way we produce food, and is also good for the resilience of food systems and environmental objectives. So the idea would be to be very transparent on the certificate about the expected duration of the storage, so that permanent storage certificates are valid forever, whereas certificates from carbon farming are only valid for a limited amount of time. And then sustainability means that the carbon removal activity should not harm environmental objectives or should even benefit them. And therefore, these benefits can be disclosed on the certificate. And then, as I was saying, we have appointed recently an expert group that will meet for the first time on the 7th of March. And ECAF is part of this expert group. And together with these experts, we will develop the certification methodologies. Then maybe here I will go a bit faster, but the idea will be that certification schemes should all appoint a third-party auditor for the verification of the projects, which is more unbiased, impartial. Then that certification schemes should have some internal rules that ensure a good governance, and that they should record the certificates on public registries that everybody can consult. And then the Commission will recognize those certification schemes that comply with these rules. And then these certification schemes that were recognized by the Commission can be can be used to certify carbon removals. So now we are at the very first step. This will take a few years. We have still, first we have still to have the law approved by Parliament and Council, which will take a year. Then we will adopt the methodologies by delegated acts. And then certification schemes can start using our methodologies. And operators can apply to certification schemes if they want to be certified. Then their activity is verified and regularly certified by an independent audit, and then the certificates can be recorded in registries. And how can these certificates be used? This is a big question that many stakeholders ask, but there is, in truth, there is nothing, no provision in our proposal about how you can or cannot use the certificates. Why? Because we see this as really a first step, a no regret option about improving the monitoring, reporting, and verification of carbon removals, and improving the reliability of the certification schemes. This is not. This does not go beyond the supply of good certificates. It does not go towards the demand or use of the certificates. First, because we first need to improve the reporting before we make any compliance requirements. Second, because we actually do have in the European Union other laws looking at fighting greenwashing and good use of carbon removals. So the idea will be that in the next years, when this framework is put in place, member states and governments and regional authorities can use it as a tool to subsidize carbon removals, because we have, as I said, very ambitious LULUCF targets. The Commission also proposed a nature restoration law recently, so it's still just a proposal, but it includes very ambitious targets also for nature restoration. And land managers, land owners need to be compensated for all the action they need to take so that member states can achieve this target. So member states could use this framework to deliver more targeted support under the CAP, under state aid, or under other national funds. Also, innovation. Also, the EU Innovation Fund already gives a lot of money to some carbon removal projects around Europe. Then in private financing, we see more and more food companies or companies in the biomass value chains that make contracts with their suppliers, so with the primary sector, because they want that their ingredients have a good climate footprint, because they want to decrease their scope 3 emissions and communicate this to their customers. So in this type of contracts, having such a framework, harmonized and high quality framework, can provide more transparency and trust. And also in voluntary carbon markets, eventually we could improve the quality of these markets. There is no link, however, with the EU emission trading system. So there is no possibility for companies who need to buy quotas for their emissions to buy a certificate instead. So buy a carbon removal certificate instead of surrendering allowances under the ETS. This is not possible. And this ensures that our objective to reduce emissions are still met, because those remain. And what we are doing here is just complementary to that. Then I said that we have other policies to fight greenwashing. So maybe you will not be so interested in this, but we have some upcoming policies under the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And there will be soon some delegated acts on how companies can report about their climate targets. And then under the Green Claims proposal, which will be adopted in a couple of months, there will also be some mention of how, when companies make a claim about climate neutrality, they should refer to our framework. Okay, that is the end of my presentation. Here are some links, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Valeria, for this insight into what is going on at the European Commission, DG Climate. And I myself do have quite some questions, but as I will have hopefully the opportunity to ask these questions in the meeting of the expert group, I will leave the floor to other participants today and well, to see whether there are questions that you hopefully can answer. So please, the floor is for the audience if you have specific questions, but please be short and precise. So you may raise the hand. John Garrity already raised his hand. So John, you were the first to go. Please,
yeah.
John.
Thank you very much, Gottlieb, and thanks very much, Valeria. That was very interesting. I just wanted to ask you, there are a number of certification schemes and carbon credit schemes that are currently attracting payments for farmers in different locations around Europe and even outside of the EU. What is the Commission's I know it's at an early stage, but what is your view, or what is the likely outcome of how those different schemes will be recognized going forward?
Yes, so when we now start working on the certification methodologies, we will first have a synthesis of what is already out there, because we want to build on the experience that already exists. We already had a study on it, but only looking at the big certification schemes, and we see that a lot of smaller ones are emerging in Europe. So some governance requirements, like having a third-party audit, are already in place in the biggest certification schemes, but maybe not so much in the smallest. So we want to a bit harmonize the governance rules. So that I cannot tell you what share is already compliant or not, but I suppose most would already be compliant. But when it comes to the certification methodologies, so a lot of certification schemes are actually not developing the methodology themselves. They take methodologies developed by, for instance, even the project operators, and they adopt these methodologies and use them to do the certification. So I don't think for their business model, it will be such a huge, a drastic change to take the certification methodologies developed by the European Commission and use it to certify their clients, so the clients, the operators. So this, we believe, will actually improve the business models for certification schemes in Europe, because they will benefit from more level playing field and a more demand if we manage to build more trust. So in the end, we went for this solution where the Commission is in control of the methodologies. But we hope in the next 2-3 years, we will have a lot of exchanges with them to build on what is already existing.
Thank you very much, Valeria. I hope John got his answer. Next is IBF. I'm not sure who is behind this. IBF, will it be?
I got it by
okay,
Michele.
it's me. I thought you. Okay. Hi, Michele. How are you? Please go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you very much for your clear presentation. But I have only a short question about which is the framework by European Union in terms of the regulation, which is attained to finish this advance of the regulation and to apply the certification scheme. Thanks. You
mean the timeline? Or...
Yeah.
Yes,
the framework, when will it be set up?
Right. So now we have, this is a proposal. So Council and Parliament have to adopt it, amend it and adopt it. So we hope this will be finished in 1 year, because then in spring of next year, there are the elections, the European elections. And so we hope to finish before, because otherwise then for a few months, the Parliament is under campaign, let's say. So we hope to finish by then, and only then we can publish the delegated acts with the methodologies. We also have to be careful, because maybe the Parliament and Council will change some of the criteria. So this year we can advance as much as possible, but still be open to possible changes in the regulation. So I would expect that the first certification methodologies will be adopted if it goes well, end of 24, but more likely in 25. And there is also the problem that we have many activities to certify, and we cannot do them all in parallel. So even when it comes to carbon farming, we will start with maybe two types of activities. We cannot do too many at the same time. So it could be that some carbon farming activity will be we only get their methodology in 26 or 27. Which activities do we start with? It's a big question. That is, for instance, one of the questions we have to discuss immediately with the expert group, because it depends what we prioritize, what the most mitigation potential, or the highest co-benefits of the environment, or the highest costs, depends.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Valeria. Tomasz, right to you.
Yes. So hello. I'm joining from Slovenia on behalf also of the Slovenian Conservation Agriculture Organization. I think also colleague Mario is there. So I have a question on the, is there already enough information or, framework so that, people on the ground can start preparing and exercising, some activities in that they will be ready for this certification. Because also like next year, so 2024, right, is the financial year where the big companies should start reporting on the corporate sustainability reporting directive. And there should, there's also a challenge how to use this information and certification, right, in this sense, right? So you have any more information on, or is it too early, to start exercising on the field some activities in context of this regulation?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. So the way I described the baseline to establish additionality allows to certify activities that already started in the past. So it's not, the baseline is not what is happening in the beginning of the certification in the field. The baseline is what the other farmers are doing. So there is no reason why farmers should wait to start an activity because they want to be considered additional in 3-4 years when the EU certification starts. There are all reasons to already start now, and if you're still considered excellent, let's say, when we start the certification, you can be certified then under the EU framework. So we actually hope to see more and more of these activities emerge. And that because now the proposal is out, the certification methodologies used by different actors can already be a bit inspired by our principles, so that there will be likely no big adjustments to be made in a few years. On the corporate reporting you mentioned, I am not sure what is already in the law as regards carbon farming, because I thought everything will be decided in this delegated act about sustainability reporting standards that will be out soon. But maybe, yeah, on that question, maybe I should double check.
Okay, thank you, Valeria.
Thank you.
Well, we have 3 further hands up, and I ask you to make very short and precise questions, as well as short and precise answers, in order not to overdo our time. Mats, you are the next.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the very clear presentations. I'm Mats Rosenberg. I'm the former managing director of the Agora Carbon Alliance. Now I'm an entrepreneur using conservation agriculture to build carbon removal programs, for which I hope to be using the new standard. My question is about the link between credits or certificates under this new standard and the objectives that member states will have towards negative emissions. Is it that member states will be buying credits to sort of account for that as part of the emission accounting, or are these objectives going to be measured in some other way, and these credits are only going to be used to basically channel resource or funds towards changes in practices that will that will result in emissions reductions?
Yeah, this is also another good question. So I have to be short. DG Climate still has to reflect on how to include the discussions in international negotiations about carbon markets under the Paris Agreement. So this concept of corresponding adjustment, I think, is what you're referring to. How the European Union takes the corresponding adjustment principle in its laws is still to be seen. But I think, personally, it is very, very likely that when a member state through the CAP or even private companies make some money go to carbon farming activities with no link to any compliance, so no link to the EU ETS, there is no reason why this mitigation action should not appear in the inventories under the LULUCF sector. Of course, as long as the inventories are precise enough to pick up and capture this kind of activities, there is no reason to separate the two. This is mitigation that is happening on the territory of a country, and so it should go to the inventories of this country.
Thank you.
But yeah, still to be discussed.
Okay. Jussi, please.
Jussi from Finland, thank you. Two questions. Seems like it's not really clear what is a permanent sink or carbon storage and what is a dynamic. And I think the EU bureaucracy system, the political system, doesn't yet understand that the dynamic sink or storage is as good as the permanent one, which is clearly very expensive and is not going to happen very well. So why, or am I right or wrong that are we really accepting a dynamic storage to be a carbon sink? It looks like politicians, they really don't understand this yet. And the other one is my little protest on this land use change system, LULU system, where agriculture fields are not regarded as possible sinks. It's only like emitting something, right? And we are, yes, it is exactly as I said, because like in Finland, we are trying to minimize field area and increase restoration to swamp or forests, just because they are included in LULU policy. But the fields are not regarded as possible sinks in LULU program. And these are two main huge political issues we are really mad about. Thank you.
What was the first?
The permanent is
dynamic. No, there is no question that carbon farming is a very important tool. The fact that it is permanent, so that it's temporary, as I said, means that there is a higher risk that the carbon is released. But of course, the carbon can very well stay there if the management practice is continued.
Yeah, but so, do we have a system to approve this? We should
yes, I mean, I said that certificates for carbon farming have a limited duration, but if a farmer continues the practice, at the end of the certificate validity, it can be renewed, so it can continue to be certified. It's just that we have to check more often that the carbon is still there. But there is, of course, you need to keep giving incentives to keep the management practice for carbon sinks. Otherwise, one will just change management practice after a few years and the carbon will be released. It's just a scientific fact that the carbon risks to be released, and we have to face this to address the risk. And in the LULUCF inventories, if soils are net sinks, this will appear as net sinks. It just so happens that in many cases, especially on organic soils, intensive agriculture causes the soil to be a carbon source. But if you change management practice and you turn the soil from a carbon source to a carbon sink, this is of course results in a good figure in the LULUCF inventory. So it's not true that agriculture is not recognized as a sink in the agriculture inventory. It depends how you manage it. Okay. Maybe we can take it also in the chat. I can also answer questions, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I was just asking Gabriela whether she dropped her question. If so, I want to thank you very, very much, Valerie, for this presentation and also for answering this pertinent, certainly pertinent questions. And I'm keen to learn more about all this in the meeting of the 7th of March. And hopefully we will meet again there. So very many thanks, Valerie, for this well, introduction and first statement from DG Climate. Thanks you very much. And I think we do have now either a short break, or is it right away to session 2?
Right away to the session 2.
Okay. Thank you very much, Valeria. And if you want to join further, please stay. If not,
thank you. Yes, I will stay a little bit more. Thank you.
okay, great. Thank you very much. So I hand over now to the session 2 moderator, which I think is our honorary member of ECAF, Amir Kassam from UK. Amir, please take over.
Thank you, Gottlieb. I'm delighted to be here and moderating this session 2. Relevant experiences with carbon farming. We have 4 presentations, and I will introduce the presenters, and then we will begin the presentation. The first presentation will be by Sophie Rousseau, and she will be speaking on French low carbon label. Sophie is director of EPAD, which is the Association for the Promotion of Sustainable Agriculture in France. Sophie's background is in marketing and communication, and she has, for the last 20 years, before she joined EPAD, was working with consulting agencies in charge of fast-moving consumer goods branding or brand projects. She now is in charge in EPAD to promote CA, conservation agriculture, with Farmers Network, and also enhancing the value of economic, social, and environmental service values, which are harnessed by conservation agriculture. The second presentation will be on sustainable agriculture initiatives, and this will be presented by Dionys Forster. He is the leader of the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative platform, and he, for the last 20 years, his experience has been as a dynamic and respected leader in agri-food value chains, and his platform serves 170 members, plus members, promoting good agricultural principles and practices. And his background, originally he worked with Nestlé's, Dionys directed numerous corporate projects and programs relating to sustainable and regenerative agriculture, within which, of course, hopefully conservation agriculture is included. The third presentation is on carbon farming standards based on conservation agriculture principle. I think we don't actually have the physical presence of the presenter, who is Juca Sa from Brazil, but we have a recorded presentation on behalf of CAPAS. CAPAS is the American Confederation of Associations in Sustainable Agriculture, with a focus on conservation agriculture. Juca is a well-known carbon researcher, and he was based in, he's a retired professor now. He was for many years in the State University of Ponta Grossa in Brazil, and his line of research, which continues still, is essentially to do with dynamics of organic matter in soil management systems, and also conservation agriculture, with emphasis on carbon sequestration and climate change. Juca is a chairman of the scientific committee of the Brazilian No-Till Association. The fourth presentation is entitled Genesis Methodology, and it is a joint presentation between Adrien de Marle and Domitil Guilloton. And apparently Genesis is a company which was formed by Adrien, who for 15 years worked as in media companies as a journalist, especially in Group Canal, and he decided, he was already dealing with environmental aspects, but he decided that he would have a better go in the broader framework if we had his own company, which he formed about 4 or 5 years ago, called Genesis. And Genesis is focused on soil health, because Adrien considers that soil health is the place where farming and environment are aligned. And currently he is in charge of development and public affairs of Genesis. And he's supported by Domitil, and Domitil joined Genesis 3 years ago, and he's in charge of the business development and partnership at Genesis. Before that, Domitil worked in investment. In fact, I think it's General Electric Ventures and Impact Investments, and she has a background in corporate finance and venture capital. So we have a panel of diverse expertise, all interested in this convergent topic of carbon farming. With that panel introduction, I will now just warn the presenters that we have only 75 minutes, and each presenter should try and make the presentation within 15 minutes or less, and then we will take questions and answers if there is time. So Sophie, please take the stage for your presentation, the French low carbon label.
Okay, thank you very much, Amir. Could you see my, yes, it's okay. Everybody can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
yes.
So thank you. I will just start to recap who we are, APAD, and we'll go away from what we're doing every day and explaining the French, trying to explaining the French low carbon label and our project. So APAD is a network of 14 associations of farmers in France, and we represent 1,000 of farmers. We're part of international network, and we're proud to be part of ECAF and the initiative for per thousands, Global Soil Partnership, and the ECAF. Our mission is to promote and valorize conservation agriculture, and we are really ambitious because we would like to be 30% of French farmers in conservation agriculture in 2030. It's really ambitious, but we've got a strategy for that, and it's based on 4 pillars, and 4 pillars for action with really concrete global projects. So the first one is to develop the network of the farmers, to improve the technical practices in farms, to promote, of course, all the benefits of this agriculture, and valorize our farmers and all the services of the conservation agriculture. For doing this, the DNA of EPAD is the collective approach. It's training, is sharing experiences in the field between farmers. To improve technical practices, we work nationally and locally. And locally, we work with all different actors in the territories. It could be water agency, the regions, departments, the regional natural parks, all the actors that could be involved in agriculture projects. And to get success in actions, we know that the farmers need to be involved in all the projects. And you will see that for the carbon farming project of APAD, it's something really necessary, and it's really a collective project and for collective benefits. We also managed to have an experimental project on a national basis, and this year's and for the next 4 years, it will be Soliflor, and it will be a wind management in CA system project. To promote conservation agriculture benefits, we manage different actions, open farms events, we participating to international and local shows, and we will be really happy to see you in SIA in France in February and March. We're doing conference and workshop with different partners, and we also develop educational projects, and we launched this year this comic to explain the conservation agriculture for the kids, and it's a really huge success. We are really happy with that. And of course, we will be really happy to meet you, Valeria, to to help for the project, because we also meet policymakers to make them sensibilization on CA benefits, and we help them to write the regulation and work on all the projects. To valorize our agriculture, we created 2 years ago a private label. It's a label that's developed everywhere in France. Its name is Au Cœur des Sols. And today it's more than 300 farms in France that is certified by this label. Now, just talking about the French law carbon label, and we will explain, I will explain how we managed to be certified by this label on our project for APAD. So the French government launched 3 years ago this label, and it aimed to certify the project to reduce greenhouse gases emissions, carbon sequestration, and to valorize economically all the system who help to do that. We are based on voluntary market. The timeline of the project is 5 years, and the targeted levels is grouped in 3 categories: nitrogen fertilization, reduction of farm energy consumption, like fuel, electricity, and extra, and carbon storage in the soil, of course. For the credits, carbon credits, the purchasing company had the opportunity to entering at the beginning of the project to support all the project during 5 years, but they will get the carbon credits only at the end, and that's really important to know, only at the end of the project, so after 5 years. For this label, there is different methods that we can pick up to be a certificate. I will talk about the field crops methods because it's the one we choose on APAD project. So there is different eligibility criteria. The first one is farm with a field crop workshop. The second one is to use a certificate tool for the calculation of the area. That means that we need to have a tool that helps to make the calculation based on the field crops method, and that needs to be certified by an independent certification body. You also need compliance with national framework of nitrate directive, irrigation water quotas, and a couple of others. And of course, at the end, to be eligible, the criteria is area emission plus area storage need to be positive, of course. All these criteria make it possible to guarantee the environmental integrity of the project. But also, you need to know that in addition to everything, to all these criteria, there is an analysis of the social, economic, and environmental impact. Sorry, it's really difficult for French to say that. So we need to analyze the environmental impacts and the co-benefits. And that's really useful for conservation agriculture because it's included all the consumption of renewable energy, soil erosion, biodiversity, and then quality of life at work. And that's really a good point for us. So in this context, APAD launched its own project to be notified to the French ministry and to get this label. His name is Du Carbone au Cœur des Sols. We did a collective project. So there are more than 230 farms that offer to APAD to be the project manager. And it represents more than 40,000 hectares. And at the end, we expected 200,000 potential tons of carbon credits certified. To make the calculation, we created our own calculator system, and that have been certified by an independent company. And as we know, we are the most important project, field crops, collective project engaged in France at this moment based on this label. And this is really important because it's a project managed for and by for the farmers to the farmers. And we are really here to valorize the farmers. And we are really happy that this project is really a success. So today, since last year, we manage this project, and we are in discussion with different partnerships and for purchasing these potential credits. And it's becoming to be a huge project, and we are really happy with that. So on the label French, there is different methods, and field crops is the one we know. And today there is no many projects on this methods, but I think it's going to be grown up in the couple of months and years. That's it for me. Thank you. I think I will be shorter, so that will be good for the timeline. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Sorry, Sophie, that was very interesting presentation, and the progress you've made is very inspiring. Move to next presentation, which is on carbon farming standards based on CA principles, a presentation by Jukasa on behalf of the CA organization for the Americas. I think, Julia, you have the presentation, recorded presentation. There's no sound, Julio.
First of all, I'd like to thank the ECAF to participate in this webinar, Carbon Farming. It's an honor for me to represent CAPAS and the Brazilian No-Till System Federation. We're going to talk about carbon agriculture, entitled Carbon Farm Standards based on CA principle. In our point of view, carbon agriculture means it maximizes soil carbon accumulation fixed by crops during the photosynthesis process, where production system with high carbon input and low CO2 emission from soil. We also believe that conservation agriculture through no-till system based in its principle is fundamental to obtain success in this kind of strategy to recover carbon. So we need to understand how does carbon balance work in the soil. Very simple. The equation is carbon by biomass minus carbon losses. That means 4 steps. Number 1 is the input, is the carbon from photosynthesis, comprised by crop residue biomass above and below ground, and the 3 steps: plant respiration, soil respiration, erosion, and leachate, that comprise carbon output. or carbon losses. Summarizing, the soil organic carbon balance means when carbon input is less than carbon output, the soil becomes an emitter, emission of CO2 from soil. When the carbon input is greater than carbon output, soil becomes a sink. So this presentation is supported for this main paper published in 2022 by our group, but we selected from 30 articles published since 2015 as a main article or remarkable articles that support these 2022 articles. It's very important we understand that the example that we will give now is based for the tropical areas, selected from the environmental pollution article. And we can see that the environmental tropical area called Lucas do Rio Verde, Mato Grosso state, in the vegetation, the native vegetation, we accounted 95.5 tons of carbon of all parts, above parts, roots, litter, carbon. And the soil until 0 to 100 centimeters, 141. And this is one of the experimental stations, is located in Rio Verde, Lucas do Rio Verde, Mato Grosso, when we selected the plots. Soil under native vegetation, you can see a simple block, 20 versus 20 centimeters, and only an example of the stage of the aggregates is completely aggregate. And we have many treatments, tillage and no-till treatments, but we accounted the soil carbon loss due conversion to agricultural area and the continuous tillage. And you can see one of the examples, soil under continuous conventional tillage, completely dispersed, and the clay is melted with the water. The first stage starts from deforestation process and burning, and after the process of tillage. The results of this, we lost 95.6 tons of vegetation and 27 tons until between 0 to 100 centimeters layer during only 8 years. This is a very dramatic losses. And when we totalize the losses, vegetation plus soil tillage is 122.6 tons per hectare. The question is, how does it work? In the soil, how was the losses? We accounted the profile, the 0 to 100 centimeters layer is a 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 6, 6 to 80, 80 to 100 centimeters. We lost 54% in the first 20 centimeters, but we lost 49.9, almost 50% below 20 centimeters layer. It is very important in tropical regions when you have no cover all year long in the soil. Look, if we have a water distribution during the year, soil uncovered, blue means excess of water, red is no water, no rain, is a deficit, water deficit, and the green is started to fill the profile and ability for the new season. So when we have soil uncovered during the 6 months, what happened? The water storage during the rainy season evaporates through the capillarity during the dry season. And the process of decomposition of organic matter is continuous because the water vapor stimulate the microbiota, and the volatile substances or labile substances are more volatile and go towards the surface. The lack of soil cover accelerates this process by promoting carbon loss from deep layers. So carbon loss in dry period can reach up 40% of the total carbon fixed and the season before. Well, it is very important, this information. So when we adopt a conservation agriculture through no-till system, that the no-till system based in its principle, that means no soil flow or disturbance, permanent soil cover, and diversity in crop rotation, we can reach the sustainability of agriculture. Let's try to understand. The first step, the green bridge. What means the green bridge? Is to keep the soil permanently covered. It means that you can put a cover during this dry period. What it means? Soybeans is the first crop during the rainy season. After that, we plant corn, associate or intercrop with Brachiaria rosesiensis. It's a grass species with high capacity of above and below parts. But after we harvest corn, Brachiaria grows fast, and we can obtain a very nice cover in the soil. In most cases, more than 15 tons per hectare. And you can plant soybeans and exemplify with this picture. So the Green Bridge promotes soil temperature control and biological activity in this region. In the first 2 centimeters during the summer, for example, January, we can reach greater than 60 Celsius degrees. Oh, it's a huge surface temperature for some time. And promote physical barrier against evaporation, the dry period. Also, the roots occupancy of pores allow nutrient absorption from the deep layers, and we can accumulate carbon in deep layers with roots. And another complementary additional information that 60% of the carbon accumulated in the soil comes from roots. Oh, another very important information. So the challenge is rotation with crops that develop robust, aggressive, and deep root system with tolerance to acidity and nutrient scarcity that take carbon deeper. Like this kind of species, for example, millet, forage sorghum, and brachiaria can take root below 100 centimeters with a very good amount of carbon. This is the secret, root rotation. So this is an example in the field. In this farm, we monitor during 5 years, follow it, try to reach the carbon balance, and you can see corn with brachiaria, the brachiaria roots, corn roots. You can do the green bridge, and the roots of soybeans mixed with brachiaria roots, promoting a very nice soil pore spaces for water infiltration. And we have also to know how is the rates of conversion of biomass carbon into soil organic carbon. We measure in many situations. For example, Ponta Grossa, when we add 1 biomass carbon tons per hectare, 73.6 back to the atmosphere as a CO2. No-till. In Sinop is a 13 salt latitude, 13 salt latitude is 85.7%. In Primavera do Leste is a 16 salt latitude is 84. That means the conversion rate from residues to the soil carbon in subtropical 14 to 26.4 and the tropical 11 to 20.5%. Summarizing, around 20 or less percent is converted in soil organic carbon. Strategies for carbon recovery, case studies. First, we are publishing soon the carbon sequestration rates for the tropical and subtropical regions of Brazil. We selected more than 70 articles published in Brazilian soils, in the international and national journals, and we selected 3 levels: accessible, reachable, and potential. For the tropical, subtropical is the tons of carbon per hectare per year. We are around 0.53, and the potential when we use a full crop system, we can add 1.75 tons per hectare year. But the average of all this work is 1.14 and 0.82. Well, what it means? We measure in Rio Verde, look at the Rio Verde, the Mato Grosso, there with a no-till system with high carbon biomass input. You can see biomass above ground. This is a native vegetation. It's a 95. We showed it before. The soil, 130 tons per hectare in between 0 to 100 centimeters. And the total carbon biomass plus soil is a 225.6 tons per hectare. When we converted, we lost 95.6 vegetation burning, in soil tillage 27, and the total 122. After no-till, continuous no-till with high carbon input, we add 80.38 tons of carbon by this rotation. We recover 17.2, and the carbon sequestration rate is 2.15, above the potential, but this rotation is very intensive. We're using green bridge and mixes in all situations, and we had a turnover time of carbon lost from vegetation and soil. We calculating almost 50 years, 49 years. That means it's possible during a generation. Okay, let's go to the last part. Carbon farming system study case. Okay, we will show 2 situations. Capuaba farm in Mato Grosso. The rotation is based in 5 years, year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Always soybeans in the first crop, only in the year 4 change for the rice. But during the second crop is a different combination, corn and legumes, mix of plants, seven mixed, turnip and back corn and brachiaria. We measure the balance is the input less output. The biomass conversion for this situation is a 19%. The biomass input based in the all measuring during 5 years with this farmer, and the outputs, the composition rate in O2 is 1.2 per year, and the carbon stock for this situation is 4.5 tons per hectare, 0 to 20 centimeters. Okay, the balance was composed by the following components. Annual dry matter input, we accounted based in the grain production and above and root parts. Annual carbon input, we measure carbon converted in SOC, losses, and the final balance. Well, for the year one, is I highlighted in red what's happened. Year one, 19.88 the addition, the input of dry matter, 7.02 carbon, and according we are changing for the rotation, we had some less input, but the carbon amount is higher, and in the conversion of the gross sequestration is 1.33 and decreased for 0.6. We lost 0.49 until 0.51, but the final balance is positive. But I showed only the year 4 until year 4. When we back the rotation for the same combination, we restore and we increase more grain yield production, we increase above and below parts, and we had a biodiversity. The average of the 5 years is positive and is accounted mainly with the biodiversity of the rotation, increasing biological activity, and promote the carbon flow during the 5 years. It was very important. And we attended the 3 principles: no disturbance, no soil disturbance, soil permanent coverage, and diversity. So the second situation is a very sandy soil, 14 to 20% of clay, more than 80% of sand in the tropical area. The rotation is more intensive with grasses compared with the previous, but we measure the coefficient losses 1.6, in the previous example 1.2, humification 19%, and the stock to 20 centimeters was 20 tons per hectare. Okay, the same, the components of carbon balance is the same: dry matter, annual carbon input, conversion, decomposition, and final balance. And we can see when we keep more grasses, and in all years was the legume was soybean, and during the second crop, the second season, we used a mix with corn or sorghum with other grasses, and we had a positive balance in all years. And when we back for the year 5, we increase again carbon production by above and below parts. We increase yields and we storage more carbon. So, summarizing this short presentation, the 20 minutes, we had a capacity of the dry matter and carbon food and the sequestration rate and the recovery time. When we base it for our experiment located in Mato Grosso, we had a 19.6 ton of dry matter, 1.38 tons of carbon per hectare per year, 2.15 the sequestration. We recover in 49 years. The model for sandy soils in Luiz Eduardo Magalhães in Bahia, we recover in 67. In Capuaba farm, with a very good input in 90 years. However, when we use only soybean and corn, there's a zero balance, zero carbon. And most of the time, we have a little negative balance. And if we use only soybean and fallow, soybean fallow as a monocrop, we had 458 years. Or zero balance is the limit between rotation and succession. We had a positive carbon balance, how much more input we have, and a negative balance if we use a monocrop. So the basis to storage carbon starts from no-till system, protecting the soil with a permanent cover, diversity, and rotation in not only in above but in root parts. We have to protect the aggregates from the oxidation. We have to control the oxidation, but this we can storage carbon. So carbon agriculture means to practice the 10 R's. What is the 10 R's? Reinvent, rethink the system, rebuild problematic areas, recycle all materials through the Green Bridge, revitalize the organic matter with microbiota, try to start the biological activity, reconnect the chemical, physical, and biological attributes, reorient our strategies, reevaluate all actions in our system, and reactivate and research. With this, we can regenerate the soil, we can preserve the soil, the biota, and the future generation. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Jukasa. It also, in a sense, highlights that there is an ongoing relationship with core benefits here as well, that you could eventually reach a new equilibrium where soil health is getting so much better that the core benefits are coming through in greater proportions, and carbon additionality may be reducing. Fine, we move to the last presentation on the Genesis methodology by Domitil and Adrian. I don't know how you're going to be making the presentation, but the floor is yours. And yeah.
Hi everyone. Can you see my screen? Yes.
It's
yeah,
it's not a full screen.
A part of.
And now it's working.
Now it's full, yeah.
Oh, I think there's something strange. Again?
Yeah, we can see you.
Are you okay?
That's it, Adrian.
That's it? Okay, but it's... Okay, so maybe because I want to have access to my commentaire. Okay, strange. So thank you, and thank you to ECAF to give us the opportunity to join and to present to join you and to present Genesis. So in few words, we found Genesis. We found Genesis 4 years ago, and it's what's happened. Okay, there's something strange today. It's again.
No.
Again.
Tu veux que je partage?
Tu peux partager? Je ne sais pas ce qui se passe. J'ai mes images qui sautent. Attends. Tu vois mon écran? Non.
Attends, je vais le faire.
Can you? It's okay?
Sorry. Wrong slide. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, well, that's good.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm sorry. I founded Genesis 4 years ago with my partner, Quentin Sagnier. Quentin has always been an entrepreneur, but me, I was a journalist. So nothing to do with the soil or with agriculture, but you will see that there's a link. When we founded Genesis, we were both convinced that agriculture was not necessarily a problem for the environment. If we found the right lever, it could even become a solution for it. So what was really missing was an accurate and reliable information. That's the link with my previous job. This information was needed. So an information about the impact of agricultural practices. That's why we created Genesis with the first environmental agency focusing on soil health. Why the soil? There's many reasons. Soil as farming practices memory. Soil is a defined space that you can attribute to a farmer. That's a good level to act. And it's at the same time an economical and an environmental asset. On soil, we can align stakeholders' interests. So that's on these slides, what you can see, it's how we define the soil health. We have the same definition, that's the FAO, the Intergovernmental Technical Panel on Soils. We say that the soil health is the ability of the soil to sustain the productivity, diversity, and environmental services of terrestrial ecosystems. In other words, a soil in good health has capacity to ensure its ecosystemic function over time. If you destroy the soil, you destroy its function and you destroy the ecosystemic services. That's why in Genesis, we seek to have the best indicators to qualify this function. And Domitil, if you can, go to the other slide. Through the soil health, you can contribute to climate with carbon storage, as you said before, to biodiversity, because 25% of biodiversity is in the soil, to water quality and quantity, and to fertility. And it's a really strategic point for the resilience of a farm. So on the other slide, please. Yeah. If you can skip, it's really important to know that Genesis is part of a scientific ecosystem, a scientific network with thought leader partners such as Monique Barbu, who is our board member. She was previously the UNCCD secretary. We work closely with the French 4 pour 1000 initiative, the Principle for Responsible Investments, and we are WWF France members for the Startup for the Planet. And we have also research partners like the CNRS, the École Normale Supérieure in France, or Rothamsted Research in Great Britain. We are also working and sharing our research with many other laboratories. And on the other slide, thank you. You can see that we are working on European research program. We are involved in 2 of them, one about the sequestration in European soils, led by the European Joint Programme for Soils, and the second about soil health indicators definition, led by Wageningen University. For the soil health standardization, we collaborate with the SBT, the Science Based Targets Initiative on Land Use, and we are also members of the ISO for the assessment of soil functions and ecosystemic services. Maybe you know that there's an ISO is in preparation about soil health and who is expected in 2025. The soil health assessment is, as we've said before, really useful for farmers, also for companies when they have some claims on environments, but it's also really useful for policymakers to drive the environmental transition. And it's good to know that the soil health, it's at the core of many public policies, as the CAP or the climate strategy or the farm to fork strategy, and especially on the soil health, there's a law with expected about the soil health with expected in June of this year. So just before I let Domitil present you our tool, our platform, just to explain how it works. So we measure in the soil health with more than 30 indicators. And by combining reliability, real measures, and affordability, scalability by data intelligence, we extend the rating from a couple of selected parcels to a farm and a defined commodity. So thanks to our rating algorithm and our soil-based reference, we could rate any type of soils and compare them. And that's what Domitil is going to show you through our platform. Thanks, Domitil.
Can you still see my screen? Okay, I guess that's a yes. Here I am on the Genesis platform and I'm embodying a farmer. What happens when Genesis is involved into a process with a farmer is the first thing we present the approach to the farmer. Of course, we're usually mandated by corporates that a farmer would sell to, either a cooperative or a direct buyer. And we get the farmer's GPS coordinates. So we first collect the GPS coordinates, and once we have these coordinates, as you can see on my screen with all the different plots on the left-hand side, what we do is that we define what we call homogeneous soil units. So homogeneous soil units are usually groups of different plots that are grouped together based on the topography and the geology and the practices that are implemented on the soil. And that's what we use in order to go and sample. So as Adrienne mentioned, everything starts from sampling. So I'm a farmer and I have given my GPS coordinates to Genesis. They have then, recalculated their homogeneous soil units, and they will send me a text saying that they will come and sample at a certain date. And the sampler that's coming on my field has all these little tick marks on a sampling app where he knows that he's gonna sample because it's important for Genesis to know that the samples are taken at specific points so that because the rating is usually repeated year after year or over a certain period of time, the sampling points needs to be GPS located. The coordinates of the sampling point needs to be located, sorry. And the sampler is also going to take pictures that are gonna first be a point of control for Genesis, but second, enable to sometimes help explain the results. It's also quality control because we can see that all the samples that are being done by the samplers are done at 30 meters depth, which is the sampling requirements for carbon schemes in Europe. And so once they've done the samples, once the samplers come on my field and done the samples, the Genesis is first looking at what's the type of soil that my soil is. So what's the context in terms of texture, but also in terms of pH, exchangeable ions, cations, sorry. And so trying to understand what type of soil I operate in. And once they have understood the type of soil, they run a set of indicators. So Genesis is using 35 indicators, which range across erosion indicators, pollution, carbon, biology, water. And so all these samples, analysis, are done. And then if we take the example of the total organic carbon, we would say that on that specific plot, we are at the 26 grams per kilos of dry matter of carbon that has been sampled and analyzed. The idea is, well, is that good or is that bad? How can I compare my soils to others? And so because Genesis has looked at what's the context of my soil, so what's the proportion of clay, sand, then I know that in the threshold or the performance that is expected for this type of soil is such, and that then my 26 grams per kilos of dry matter translate into something that's pretty good, a 58 out of 100, and we can compare it to the entire database of Genesis, which is what you're seeing highlighted behind, sorry, in shaded behind. And here is all my farm, the samples that have been taken on my farm performance. And so I get access to all that report with the specific indicators, both the data that, the raw data that I just showed you, but also the data that goes between 0 and 100 for every single indicator. Genesis is normalizing the data. So the idea is that I can compare my performance to any type of soils or people that are producing the same thing as what I am producing on my plots. And then with these 35 indicators, as Adrian mentioned, Genesis is looking at soil health and trying to give a picture of soil health. So this picture is given through 4 pillars. These 4 pillars are biodiversity, climate, water, and fertility. And so the indicators are aggregated into the indices. And so here I can see the performance of my plot that has been rated. Which is pretty good. Really, really good, actually, overall. All the rating as per the normalized indices go between 0 and 100. If you go between 0 and 40, we say that you have warning points. Then if you go between 40 and 60, it's neutral, and between 60 and 100, it's good. Good health. And so I then get one home plot results that gets aggregated with all the different plot results. So I have a visibility of how my farm is doing all together based on what has been rated. So here my farm is 51 hectares. Genesis rated 42, so 83% of this through 7 homogeneous soil units that have been rating. And so overall, my farm rating is 62, which means it goes, between, it's in the top 40 performers of what Genesis is rating. And most of my plots rated actually have a positive impact, have a good health, as we can see that 89% of them are positive. And since Genesis is going on the field and looking at, taking actual measures, they also measure a positive contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals of several sustainable development goals, but they also quantify what we call environmental metrics. And so in the environmental metrics, what Genesis is doing is that since we measure the total organic carbon, we also use ABAC for density, for bulk density, and through pedo transfer function, we actually calculate the total the ECO2 ton equivalent, globally stored by my farm, but also the stock per hectare. And we also do that for water overall for the farm and per hectare. And we give that overall report to the farmer. So as a farmer, I would access to all of this. And from a client standpoint, since Genesis is not making farmers pay, but the one paying are the one usually, I mean, it would be big co-ops or industrials, and I will just show later. They would be the one financing the rating, so they would get a vision of the commodity that they're following. And so if I go back here, up, sorry. And so as you probably understood, when a farmer is rated within the Genesis platform database, he gets access to, he benefits from all the data that we already sampled, because he can compare himself to the rest of the referential and identify. And the idea is that we then identify practices that are having positive impact on soils and the ones that are potentially having negative impact on soils, depending on the type of soils that the farmer is operating within. And so the more data we collect, the more accuracy and precision we can provide to the farmer. The idea is that all the indicators that we're using are useful for the farmers to adapt their practices, but also useful for corporates for their ESG reporting. So some indicators might be talking more to farmers from an agronomic perspective, and some indicators might be talking more to ESG reporting individuals. The key for Genesis is to actually create a standard and to become a standard within the upcoming years. Today, we're currently operating in 6 countries in Europe, in the US, and soon in Latin America. But our goal is to create a common language about soil and the regenerative impact of agriculture, and to align everybody in order to accelerate the transition, since we have this easily understandable rating. And as I was mentioning, we work with, the one paying for the ratings are the partners that you can see on the screen. Adrienne, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that we are working in 4 domains. We are working with textile, cosmetic, perfume companies, that's the first, with food industry, another, I think it's another type of clients, but also we are working on a renaturation project. That's a point, renaturation project, or on risk analysis projects too, for land assets. And I think there's some question, maybe. I see.
Thank you, Domitil and Adrienne. Professor Basch, we started 10 minutes late. We're already into coffee break. Are we allowed to take a couple of questions?
Well, I would say, 1 or 2.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you. So please come forward with questions or observations. I just have a comment. I would love to see ECAF and conservation agriculture regional networks as part of your partners, and so that we can, this is in the future, so that you could, you are able to.
Hans.
Yes, Hans, yes.
Hello, everybody. I'm a farmer in Austria, and a question to Dionysus. My idea is to to get the CO2 via the chain, the food supply chain, to a miller and at least at bakery, for instance, by calculation with the Cool Farm tool. I think it's done by SAE. And I calculated my farm, and I'm in a CO2 plus. And is it possible to get the CO2 along the food supply chain to the miller, to the bakery, and they will pay a higher price for my wheat, for instance?
Very quickly, so just to correct that, so the Cool Farm tool is developed by the Cool Farm Alliance, so it's not by SAE platform, but we collaborate with the Cool Farm Alliance as well. So I cannot really speak on the behalf of the Cool Farm Alliance, but what I can say, we have a B2B solution in the making. At the moment, it's tested in dairy, but it's basically the same thing. It could be deployed in any other supply chain, which would allow then to forward, let's say, the reductions or possibly even the sequestration through the entire supply chain, provided that everybody in the supply chain would participate in the tool. So that they all actually sign up and access it. So that would mean that if you sell to a particular, let's say, aggregator, the aggregator would, and you basically give the right that the aggregator can access your KPIs. Basically, he's for the volume that the aggregator buys, he will get basically, let's say, the reductions associated. So that could go on as long as necessary in the entire supply chain.
Thank you. One more question before we break to any of the presenters. Thank you, Hans.
Well, sorry, I'm here to intervene. There were 2 or 3 questions in the chat. Maybe if there one of you who placed a question in the chat could still come up and placing one more question through the voice.
You see here, I put a question of UK ADAS Yen Zero. I visited their 10-year Kala 2 days ago, and I found out that they have done tremendously good work on joining soil data, agronomic data, meteorological data, a lot of good work, and I see that as an interesting point of cooperation for I refer this last presentation.
Okay, it's all data from plowed soils, and I suppose
there are farmers joining who are no-tillers. It's not plowed soil, not at all. Maybe majority, but there are a lot of no-tillers already, and especially in the Yen Zero, which is a carbon footprint.
Very good, very good.
They are mostly no-tillers, and they are doing extremely good work, I think.
As long as that's labeled, that's very good data set. About 17% now of UK farm area is now under conservation agriculture. So thanks to Juice. Okay, and there was a question by Jana, who actually in the Genesis work, who is paying for all the field work and soil analysis.
It could be our clients, but our client it could be farmers, but the most part of the time it's companies who are paying us to help their farmers to go in a regenerative agriculture. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone who made this session so good and lively and full of lovely, good information. And so I hand the session back to the chairman, Gottlieb and Julio.
Okay. Thank you very much, Amir, for this moderation.